Today's episode of Shockwaves is brought to you by Incarnate, in theaters on December 2nd. Incarnate follows a scientist with the ability to enter the subconscious minds of the possessed. He must save a young boy from the grips of a demon with powers never seen before while facing horrors of his past. So grab a friend, check out Incarnate in theaters on December 2nd. Okay, and welcome to episode number 26, part 1 of Shockwaves. I'm your host, Rob Galluzzo. Sitting with me is Mr. Elric Kane.
In the deep end of sausage parties.
Hey now, what does that mean? Oh, that's right.
Look around. What do you think it means?
Guys today. It's just you and Ryan Turek.
It's only going to get worse.
It's only going to get worse.
Becca's in a hospital somewhere.
Just after we get a great write-up about Becca's inclusion. Just kick her out.
We squeezed her out this week.
We squeezed her. No, she's...
Becca's down for the count this week.
She's down. We're sending her well wishes. She's okay. Don't worry. We thought we were
As far as we know, Rob.
As far as we know.
Could have gotten a lot worse.
She texted us she emailed us that she had to use her epidermal, which, unfortunately, Elric and I did not get to stab her in the chest with it like we wanted to. Yeah. Apparently, it goes in her leg anyway, so we would have been we probably
break the chest bone.
We would have done it worse.
That's all I know.
And it's not very dramatic. It is literally just a insert
pen in the leg.
Yeah, it's a pen in the leg.
Not in my mind. It's not right.
So she's not feeling well and will not be joining us for this or the second part of this, which is the interview. So, well wishes to Becca. She'll be back soon enough. But we're here. We're here to guide you, entertain you, talk about horror and all that good jazz. So yeah, let's dive right in.
Let me ask you guys something.
Ask us.
Well, no, because we gave everyone that positive episode last week. It was about escapism. It was right after the election. This isn't our topic yet, but I do want to ask you. No, I want to ask you personally if you guys jumped straight back into horror, because I just realized unconsciously that I didn't watch anything for almost a whole week till about 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
And it was unconscious. Like I wasn't trying to stay away from horror. I just realized I didn't feel like watching it.
Yeah, same here.
I did a palate cleanser. I watched Star Trek Beyond.
Yep.
Because I had never seen it.
Fun.
It's
just great.
Really good
great
film.
Fun.
Yeah, really, really good movie. I was really surprised.
Best usage of Beastie Boys yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't deny that.
It was funny. I was like, oh, they're doing a callback. This is fantastic.
That's great.
But really good movie. But I did a palate cleanser. I watched Star Trek Beyond, and then I dove right back in. I was like catching up on it. I have a stack of Blu-rays.
You also have you haven't got much choice.
Yeah.
Your job depends.
But
I was surprised by that. It was an unconscious feeling. There was just something in the mood where I didn't feel drawn. And the one that got me back into watching something, I went away for the weekend, which was also helpful, I think, mentally, to just get out of your life for a couple of days. It was actually Black Mirror, the thing I would have wanted to avoid most, because I feel like a lot of people commented, we're in an episode of Black Mirror. That was kind of the joke.
Yes, and even the creators said, no, this is not an episode of Black Mirror.
But I was staying with family, and they were like, oh, you got to watch episode 2 of season 3, which I hadn't yet because it's a horror film. And it was directed by the guy who did 10 Cloverfield Lane. And it is a really fun episode.
Really? Because I've only seen the first one with Bryce Dallas Howard so far.
No, not Damien Chazelle. Dan Trachtenberg.
Dan Trachtenberg.
That's right.
And this one is like a guy who's basically traveling around. He's an American traveling overseas for money on his OE, and he finds out if he can get paid to be in an immersive video game. So there's an element, again, of the kind of things we've been talking about a lot lately, and it's a horror video game. And it's by a very famous Japanese designer, and all the rage, but super high-end intellectual property secret. So he goes to an actually haunted house where he's injected with something, and he's going to have these experiences. I won't tell you anything more. It is super fun. It's a great episode. Yeah. And then I chased that. After that, I was kind of back in. It was like 1 week down and back
on board.
And then I only watch because I want to savor this because this show is so fucking strong. Just in general, Black Mirror.
I think that's a general consensus too, because I haven't seen anybody completely binge it.
Yeah.
They're savoring it and letting it play out on Facebook amidst all the political posts I've been seeing on a constant basis. Every once in a while, it's like, oh, I just caught up with Black Mirror episode 4 or 5 or whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool.
Episode 3, the guy that was my brother-in-law was saying to me, you know what? I watched episode 3 and then I just had to stop for a while because it is so dark. and it's beautifully shot. This one's by another good film director, James Watkins, who made Eden Lake.
Oh yeah,
and he wrote The Second Descent and things like that. This is very close to the tension experience. Not the experience I got, but what Andrew went through on the how he talked about months of doing stuff without. Yeah. It's literally a story about people sending you messages and you have to do the thing, otherwise something bad will happen. But you don't really know where it's all headed, and it is bleak and dark. But it just the cleverness of this show.
Is there a way out? I mean, like, you're getting messages. Do they establish really early on that?
Yeah, straight away they establish, but you don't know what they have on everyone. Right. That's kind of the twist, where the twist going. Again, in every episode I've ever seen, I've never seen a bad episode. There's a couple that are weaker than others. So far this season, they've all been
pretty top notch.
I'm 3 for 3, and I'm going to wait till next week to dive back in. But it's so cool to see something that even though we were all joking we're in an episode of Black Mirror, the thing is it uses its brain so well that it connects to you in a way and kind of actually gives you a little bit of fight back.
Oh yeah,
and realizing we're not slaves to this Black Mirror.
It definitely makes you. Yeah, no, I mean I think it's some of the sharpest satirical writing right now. It's like my biggest influence is Black Mirror, just because I just like the idea of taking something. You could tell a great story just by getting a really great sci-fi conceit, but it's not about the sci-fi conceit. It's about how people respond to it,
and making it really about the individual.
Well, exactly,
not the universal concept.
It really is. I mean, like a modern day Twilight Zone, isn't it?
Yeah, big time. It's the closest thing we've had.
It's the closest thing. I mean, we've had a few try to skirt it. We've seen them reinvigorate the Outer Limits and Twilight Zone to varying degrees of success. But I mean, to do something that legitimately puts its own stamp and voice on today, and tell a very horrifying or thrilling story is just like.
And I feel a part of that is because we've never been this close to science fiction. We're actually in a moment in history where we move towards science fiction really quickly. Like some of these things they do in some of these episodes could happen in the next couple of years with VR. Yeah. Like especially the one where Robert Downey Jr. bought it, where you record things with your eyes. I mean, that literally could be around the corner for all we know. So I think that's where that show's really crushing it. It's just good stuff and kind of just got me back into the swing. And watched last night Train to Busan, which I hadn't seen.
Oh, yeah.
Went to that last night with Dick and a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I straight away was just like, it's 28 days Snowpiercer. I mean, literally these two parts where they're going through the train are great. But, it's kind of cartoony in some ways, but in that great South Korean way where it's still emotional. Yeah. And it shouldn't be. Some of it's super cheesy
by the
music
end,
swells.
By the end, like I said, I'm devastated. I'm just like, oh.
Yeah, it's hard for me to believe that there could be 2 South Korean movies in my top 10 this year. You're like, wow, like and the Whaling's so different, but I actually prefer the Whaling on a personal level because it's so different. But Snowpiercer is a total crowd pleaser,
Right, and what's funny was I was talking to somebody about Train to Busan yesterday, and they told me I would have to look it up because I'm drawing a blank on it. But he said that this is the director's first live action feature. He actually
because he did the cartoon.
He did a cartoon which is apparently a prequel to this story, and I was like, really? That's insane. So,
and now he's doing a sequel already.
Sun Ho Yeon is
he's
director.
doing a prequel, right? I think he's doing a prequel about how it breaks out.
It's called Soul Station.
Soul Station.
Soul Station, and that is technically kind of a prequel to this thing.
Interesting,
but it's animated. So that's. I
was wondering what the story with that was.
Yeah,
interesting. Okay, cool.
But if you haven't seen it, I think it's still in some theaters.
I think I got a limited re-release, and I know it's coming. I believe in December to Blu-ray and VOD,
and it's definitely a big screen film. That was because it's actually rather than just being a zombie film, it's a disaster film first,
right?
And then it's a horror film. So it's kind of like Poseidon Adventure or something.
Oh no,
and within that you have the zombie.
Yeah, it's completely. It's like that Irwin Allen meets Danny Boyle kind of thing,
which is super fun.
I love the distinct characters. Like there's one guy in particular. I remember after I saw it, the guy who I'm talking about. I texted a photo of him to Ryan. I was like, "This guy," and you were like, "Yep,
that's the guy you want to be, man.
That's the guy you want to be." And again, I was when I was talking to somebody about this last night. It was. When it comes to zombie stuff, because I think a lot of us are pretty sick of zombie movies, as long as you introduce at least one new element that I've never seen before, then I'm kind of on board. And this had one that I thought was really cool.
The physical side of them was interesting and fun. And there's one sequence towards the end with the train going, and a lot of them, and I won't exactly ruin it. Oh, yeah, but it's a big shot. But that's a moment where you look at whoever you're at the movie with and go, "Oh, I wish World War Z did that." Like you can't help but go. You see a comparison because it feels real.
Yeah, no, that was that thing that. that was that beautiful moment that I was like, oh, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm really loving this beyond the characters and beyond the emotion. This is what I'm really attracted to, and they're giving us something new to watch.
Giving it all to
I had a great experience watching. I may have already told you guys on the show before, so forgive the repetitive nature, but we have a little Korean movie theater here in Los Angeles that just shows Korean films. So that's where I got to see this several months ago. And the thing about it is, I think Korean people just go to whatever's playing there. They don't know the movie. So it's me and my buddy Scott Reynolds, who are obviously horror nerds, and a lot of like couples, and in particular, there was an older gentleman next to us, probably in his 60s, with his wife. And I mean, we were watching his reaction. He was just jumping and like covering his eyes and covering his ears the whole time. And as soon as the lights went up, Scott just turned to him. He's like, "I didn't think you were going to make it, man. Are you all right?" It's like this little old man that was just sitting there. So it was really fun. Yeah, I strongly recommend it. I think it's a great movie.
And it's nice to see big movies being made outside of America, like movies that actually have budgets and they can. It's not just a foreign film in that sense.
And the studios right now are trying to chase it. There's a couple of studios that are chasing that.
But again, tonally, how do you tonally, like you were saying, some things might be a little cartoony, but because of there's a certain style.
You root it in that that kind of that father-daughter relationship,
But South Korea also does do weird comic characters that somehow work.
Oh yeah,
and it's always really kind of. I do think that'd be hard. I think an American remake would have to be a lot straighter. Or a flat-out comedy. Which no one needs, especially a big budget one. The last thing I saw, just rounding it up, continuing my neo-noir reevaluation of Val Lewton films. This is one I hadn't seen before, called Isle of the Dead. It's a Mark Robson film. It's, the thing, Val Lewton, the real quality, if you go back and watch this box set at some point, the real quality is the silent moments, the mysterious moments, the moments that are kind of ambiguous they're next to nothing in cinema.
Is it Isle of the Dead one?
Boris Karloff on a weird island.
Yeah,
a general.
And there's a virus.
There's a plague is broken out. It's really cool.
It's really good.
The only downside to this one compared to some of the others, and I think it might be both the ones with him acting in it, is they're more talky. So the more talky parts are just not effective. Like that's why Jacques Tenier ones are always so like cat people. It's just pure expressionism, right? This one for me isn't as effective until you get to the end, and then you get some really creepy moments. So it's like, and these movies are all 72 minutes. I mean, all of them. It's amazing.
But they feel like 90.
Longer. Yeah, this one especially to me was the least effective so far. I still have to do the I can't remember what the Gravedigger one's called, and there's one where Boris Karloff Bedlam is. I've never seen that one either. So I've got a couple more that I'm going to round out in November, and then I will post some links to the box set for you guys if you're. But it's been really rewarding.
Isle of the Dead is a real gem.
Yeah,
I mean, definitely seek it out. I remember I picked that up when I was in college. Was just kind of doing what you're doing. I was just kind of going through all that stuff, and I think I did Seventh Victim and Isle of the Dead as a double feature.
Yeah, Seventh Victim I think is brilliant. Yeah. The more I think about it, it's so bleak. But this will appeal to you though. I have been thinking that the only person you could kind of compare him to as a producer is actually Jason Blum. And not in terms of the minutia, because obviously Jason doesn't get in there and move around props. Right. But in terms of having a stamp as a producer on your whole brand of a style.
Totally.
And a lot of it was RKO would just go, hey, you've got this budget and here's a title and you've got to make us a horror film. But then you put all this soul as a producer into it. And then he created kind of a formula and hired different directors. So I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting that I can't think of other producers who have recently, Corman's obviously his own beast.
Right.
Because he actually directed.
And also Isle of the Dead has kind of some of the stuff, like touches of what we do every once in a while, these little chamber pieces that are just very contained. And,
because that's what you can pull off. I mean, that, you within a budget that you get. So anyway, interesting, and I highly recommend diving into these when you get a chance.
Yeah.
Alrighty. What about you, Ryan?
I caught a few things. The AFI Fest is going on right now here in Los Angeles, and there was this curious little documentary that I checked out earlier this week called Fear Itself.
Yeah, I've been trying to get it illegally from the UK BBC site, and it doesn't work here.
Oh, really?
But it's already on the BBC.
So it already debuted over there?
Over there, yeah. And you can watch, for anyone listening, you can watch the first, 7 minutes of it on Vimeo, and after that, that's it.
Okay, it's a very interesting...
like an essay. It's like a film essay, right?
It is literally an essay.
Yeah.
But it's told through kind of a fictional means. It's written and directed by this kid, and I say kid because he looks like...
I think he's 24 or something.
He looks like he's like in his early 20s, fresh out of film school. Everybody on the team, they all came out beforehand.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and his name is Charlie Line, and it's basically a collection of horror scenes. They're all accredited, and they all say in the lower left-hand corner, but they all kind of flow into one another while this woman talks about being in a car accident or being in an accident and then having to go back and just watch horror movies. She was going to watch some horror movies, and then her observations of horror movies as she went on this journey. And then it kind of segued into something about her sister, and it made it very emotional. So you're kind of doing an audience connection to the narrator and wondering what her story is, and then a connection to her commentary on horror films from how they kind of break down our own personal fears, socio-political fears, why would we want to kind of go into something that makes us terrified all the time?
Kind of like what we've been doing for a couple years.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, but it was done in a very kind of like eloquent,
felt kind of poetic
way. Yeah. I don't know what the crowd overall thought of it, but it was funny because there was this weird disconnect that occurs because you're listening to her and you really want to like pay attention, but at the same time you get wrapped up watching the scenes. So and there's a lot. It's an eclectic mix of scenes that ranges from movies like Don't Look Now and some Cronenberg and stuff like that to full on like really obscure J horror, K horror kind of stuff.
Anything you didn't recognize?
Strange. Yeah, there were a few. There were a few that I was kind of like, oh, I needed to check that out, you know?
Oh, that's cool.
And they all went by their original foreign titles. There was no English translated title, so it's kind of like, So strangely, an absence of French and Spanish horror. I could be wrong on that, but
probably because of Brexit. He was done with them.
He was just like, fuck this. But Fear itself was an interesting little experiment. Apparently the filmmaker did one about teen comedies.
Yeah, I saw that on his bio.
Something about Clueless or something like that. So I imagine it's kind of like the same experiment, which is like a dissertation on teen comedies while you're seeing these kind of things thematically play out based on what she's talking about.
Does it stay one note flat, or is there a moment where it builds to something bigger and you feel like, ooh, like with the clip and commentary and... Like The Nightmare, I feel like at times took peaks.
It does, yeah. It does. No, there are peaks and valleys, yeah. No, that's the thing. And I think that's what I was missing from it. That's like a big criticism is it doesn't feel like you were building to it. But once this narrator started talking about her sister, you were kind of like, oh, this is going to go somewhere. And it's going to build to this big revelation, Kind of does, And then it literally ends. Credits start rolling, and the Mutilator Fall Break theme song starts playing.
What?
And I was like, wait a minute, what?
Wow. That's
very unusual.
That's an odd choice
to close that out. It is very, very unusual. Wow. I was like, okay.
That's pretty funny.
I question where the filmmaker actually stands on horror films because beforehand they came out, for a little introduction, and they were like, obviously, this is a dark time for America. This is really, this is crazy. And we've just spent like the last 6 months really depressed because we've been watching a lot of these movies that you're going to see clips from. And I was like, I don't know if depression is something that you kind of want to walk away from, but but it's all on the screen. It's all in the narration. I don't know when they're going to show it here.
Yeah, I'm wondering.
Here in the States.
But it's not a documentary.
It's not a documentary.
Because that's a narrative, right?
Oh, yeah. It's got a narrative, but it's just more analysis.
Yeah.
When you go to like Dark Delicacies here in Burbank, there's like those great analysis books, very like Carol Clover, Men, Women, and Chainsaws. It's about the closest I would say you can get to something like that. I've always wanted to do a Men, Women, and Chainsaws documentary,
That'd be cool.
But have that kind of thoughtful analysis kind of driving it without having to have the talking heads going, so this is what a final girl is. It's just like having something cool play into it.
I did contact Carol Clover once for back in the old show, This Week in Horror, and she just said, I don't talk about that anymore. Wow. She just doesn't like that book. There's no reason to.
Wow. All right. Whatever, man.
The other thing I watched is Body Snatchers.
The Ferrara? Oh, cool. The Blu-ray?
Yeah, the Blu-ray.
It just came out from Warner Archive.
I've been holding out.
Beautiful looking, really nice. Yeah. It's been some time since I've seen it. I just kind of bought it because I was like, when it came out when I was in college, and I was a huge fan. I even had the poster because I thought the poster was super cool. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers is an interesting series to me because I feel like you can keep updating it every decade, and we've seen that how we saw, the 70s, the 50s version. We saw the 90s version, and then we saw the inversion.
Saw it last week with half the country voting.
Yeah. But Body Snatchers is an interesting movie because you could tell it's just Abel fighting studio, like literally minute by minute, from, I feel like, the soundtrack down to just some of the performances. To me, the movie has no second act. It has no second act. It literally is about this girl who moves onto a military base with her father, who's part of the EPA, and he's doing some research into a chemical leak, or so, you know, how the military is handling the chemicals they have on the base. And what they don't know is that predominantly most of the bases are pod people, and they're systematically converting everybody into pod people, and they're after her family. So you have a lot of paranoia kind of building up, and then the rest of it's just a chase. So it's just like build. Oh, you're not a pod person, run, you know, and then that's it. It's just like a game of hide and seek.
I got to revisit that. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I remember it being kind of still having some dark Abel stuff and a key suicide of one character that I remember being surprised.
Oh, yeah. Well, Forrest Whitaker's in it.
Yeah.
And
Skura, right? Annabelle Skura? Is that
yes. Yeah. Wait a minute. From the girl. She's like a model. That's the lead?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Gabrielle.
Gabrielle. Yeah, Anwar. Yes, that's her.
And Meg Tilly.
Ooh,
Meg Tilly.
That's right.
And Meg Tilly gives a terrific performance. Super creepy.
Yeah.
She has this one moment where she does this whole, you know, where are you going to go, where are you going to hide, you know, and it's fantastic. But it's a very unusual little early 90s horror movie. I don't know if it's entirely successful, but it has its charms, and it still kind of drives home, you know, all of the paranoia and fear that the previous Invasion of the Body Snatchers movies did. It's certainly a better film than the Invasion.
Yeah, much better. That's the fourth.
Never saw that one.
Yeah,
it's really just
and
flat.
Larry Cohen told
flat,
us that he did the story for this one. The Abel Ferrara, remember?
Right, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, but Stuart Gordon did the script.
Oh, really?
Stuart
Wow.
Gordon was
Gordon and I think Paoli.
Oh, really? That's crazy.
Get the credit.
What a
for
weird
it.
combo of director, you know, the screenwriting credit and
Yeah,
story by.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That one's really good. So check that out if you can. And then I caught up to Waxwork after our last week's show. I finally had to dig into my my Blu-ray. And what a great movie that is.
It is. It's just fun, man. Pure fun.
It's such a fun.
I saw you post a steak tartare.
The steak tartare. Oh God! If you go to the Blumhouse Instagram, I had to put up
what it
the vampire talking about steak tartare.
I knew that was you.
But the funny thing is, you know, my girlfriend brought up a good point because it was her first time watching it, and she goes, "This is very Cabin in the Woods-esque." And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right, because it's all these kids being lured into horror movie tropes to unleash an ultimate evil.
Yep.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I haven't
Let's
seen
get
it.
Drew Goddard in here. Let's find out the
I
scoop.
know, yeah.
Big fan of Waxworks or what?
Yeah. But the funny thing about Waxwork is just like not I'm like so story driven, like in my work, I'm like super hypercritical of everything. And watching Waxwork, it's just so interesting to me that they pick off all of his friends, most of his friends in the first like 20 minutes. Yeah. And then it's a little procedural, you know, kind of getting into it. And then it goes completely bonkers at the end. You know?
That's my favorite structure.
It's so
one that just goes bonkers.
Well, no, because anybody else who would tackle it would just be about set up, Waxwork. Oh, isn't it creepy? Second act. Oh, all my friends are getting picked off. Third act, you know, escape and, you know, let's run away. But no. Hickok's don't got time for that.
No,
he's just like we gotta kill it. We gotta kill a bunch of people, lay down the rules.
Yeah, spends a little too much time with the Marquis de Sade, to be honest.
A little too much.
There.
Oh, but she's freaky, man.
Oh yeah,
that girl is freaky.
Yeah,
freaky. I was like, wow. I didn't realize how how sexualized she is.
Repressed.
Yeah.
Did you hit part 2 as well?
I'm gonna do that this weekend.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm gonna do it.
Have you ever seen the second one?
Yeah, I remember not being too much of a fan.
Yeah, it's not that good, but there's some interesting ideas in it. Bruce Campbell's got a really great part in there, and it's funny. Yeah. I watched his interview, and he said the only reason he did it is because he did Vampire
Sundown,
a Vampire and Retreat with Anthony, but more because he was getting ready to do Army of Darkness, and it was something like it was like 4 months away from starting Army of Darkness, which was going to be a huge studio, one of his big breaks kind of in the studio business. And he hadn't acted in a while. And he was nervous that he was going to be so he literally
warm up a little bit.
He admits it. He's like, it was only like 4 days on Waxworks 2. Anthony's a good guy. I was like, whatever. It'll be a nice warm up for Army of Darkness. So I did.
That's amazing.
It's pretty cool. He's very candid about it. Well, and his scene is hilarious. So
yeah.
I like that.
I just remember there was a Fango photo of him like with a pipe and like his chest is torn open or something like that. And I was like, that's a great great still.
Well, his bit is his chest is torn open and they keep throwing things at him that, like salt and just things, and he's just pulling his Bruce Campbell. That stings. Everything's fine though.
So good. And then lastly, have you guys checked out Scream Factory's Horror Hunters?
What's the scoop with this?
It's a 30-minute show that is basically like American Pickers, where it's about these two guys who basically go and visit the largest horror fan collections in the country. And so they go to one guy and then they go to another guy, and basically they go there, they dig around in his collection, they see how crazy they are for horror, and then at the end of each segment they go, so we want to make a trade. We really like this poster, so we brought you this. And then, on the spot, they go, do you want to trade with us? And they'll either go, yeah, maybe, or no. And one time, one guy gets turned down. He's like, no, sorry. I think it's like the Frankenhooker VHS. He's like, I'll trade you all of this for the Frankenhooker VHS. And the guy's like, yo, I got Frankenhooker tattooed on my head, so I am not giving up this VHS. But it's amusing. It's like it's fun because you get to go behind the doors of these guys who have all these massive collections that outdo all of us combined.
They can find it on their Facebook page alone. They can find these people.
But it was cool. It was like oh cool. There's like a little horror collector show for us,
and it's on there. How do you see it?
It's on the Shout Factory TV, shoutfactory.tv or something like that.
Okay, which I think might also be a YouTube channel.
I think so. Yeah,
they might have their own YouTube channel as well. I'll have to look into it.
But check it out. It's fun.
Cool. Yeah, I was curious about
It'd be cool to have a version of that where you're going looking for the pieces for the museum that they're doing. Not so pieces and trying to get them for the museum. I think that'd be a fun show.
Like a little Indiana Jones. This belongs in a museum.
Not time for love, Dr. Jones.
So
what about you, Rob?
Yeah, no, it's funny because as Elric pointed out, I'm realizing all of my picks today are actually kind of fringe horror picks. I guess I was actually unconsciously staying away from horror because there's enough in the world. But that said, last week the Cinefamily, silent movie theater here in Los Angeles, hosted a not even midnight. It was a couple hours before midnight, but a midnight screening of Doomsday, Neil Marshall's 2008 follow-up to The Descent. Haven't seen it in a couple of years. Still love it. The movie's crazy. It's really have you seen it?
If that was a car commercial for that car, there was moments when I was first watching where I was like, holy shit, the car's so clean and it's in the post-apocalyptic world.
It was great. I mean, I haven't
seen it in years.
If you haven't seen it, it's a mashup. It literally, and he gave a very candid, fun Q&A after he was there and chit-chatted about it, and pretty much was like, I can't believe that the studio gave the money to make this movie exist. Because
I think the studio said the same thing.
Yes, they did.
I think Rogue said the same thing.
That's fun.
Yeah, and he admitted that he learned a lot of harsh lessons on this movie, and that's why he's glad he did it. But to me, I always joked with him. I was like, so let me get this straight. You walked into a Universal exec meeting like a 12-year-old kid and said, it's going to be like Aliens, and then it's going to be like Escape from New York, and then there's going to be Excalibur, and and then we'll do car chases like Mad Max. And they said yes. And that's so everything I just described is in that movie. Rana Mitra, probably the pinnacle of her greatness in anything. I know she did one of the Underworld movies and she was on Nip Tuck for a little bit, but she will never be hotter or more badass than she is in Doomsday.
Totally.
And he, of course, it was fun because half the audience had not seen it. And they were really into it. So it was a great way to see it as opposed to when it came out, when a lot of people didn't see it at all.
And we were all watching on DVD, probably most of us. Yeah. Big screen, I imagine it kills.
It was a lot of fun. And somebody in the audience asked him if he, if it was success, would you have done a sequel? And he started to describe what his sequel idea was, but he's like, I haven't thought about it in so long. And then like the next day, it all came flooding out. So I wrote an article about it directly from his quotes. He's like, this is exactly what my sequel would have been. And it sounded really pretty bonkers as well. So... but yeah, I mean, it's one of, it's a great little fun movie. If you're just looking for just like an adrenaline blast of craziness.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the, I feel like years after we're all dead and destroyed and like some alien race comes down and finds like Blu-rays, and then they kind of like dig into film history and they go, what is this? And then they look at movies like, what's that movie? Or is it the one of the and all those kind of like Italian action, kind of weirdo post-apocalyptic movies are going to be like, oh, that's what Neil Marshall was trying to do.
Don't work it out.
There's something really batshit crazy,
Well, the coolest thing about it, by the way, was there's a character in the movie. His name is Saul. I should have brought up his real name, but he's like the crazy like leader of the cannibals with the mohawk. He's like right out of Road Warrior. And Neil said he's like, that's a good friend of his. He's the guy in the opening scene of Dog Soldiers.
Oh yeah,
with the girl,
Yep.
and he's also the main creature in The Descent.
Oh, cool.
So he's been in all his first couple of movies. He was in all of them.
That's awesome.
So that's a lot of fun. And then I started digging into Shout Select, which is Shout Factory has Scream Factory for their horror titles, and now they've launched Shout Select, which is kind of culty movies, I would say. Some of the first releases were The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai and Roadhouse, like things of that ilk, and the Bill and Ted movies.
Midnight Run under that?
Yes. Oh. So that's one of them as well. So the two that I watched are kind of horror-y. Nighthawks from 1981, which I'd never seen before.
Rutger Hauer
and Sylvester Stallone is 1981, so it's right after. It's I think a movie or two after Rocky 2.
I feel like that came up recently on our show, didn't it? Didn't somebody watch Nighthawks?
I think so. I think we brought up Nighthawks, but I love this movie. I'd never seen it before. I'll tell you where I recognize it from is a lot of us grew up watching a 1984 film called Terror in the Aisles, which is a compilation movie. It's hosted by Donald Pleasance. He's in like a movie theater and like you never know who's sitting behind you, and then they show clips from all these movies. For a long time, it was on VHS, and then for a long time, Terror in the Aisles was like impossible to put out because there's so many clips in it that the rights issues or whatever.
Right.
But the Universal release of Halloween 2 has it as a bonus feature.
Right.
If it's a free bonus feature, there's no issue with rights. So technically, obviously, if you're a Halloween fan, you want Scream Factory's release of Halloween 2. But if you just want Turn the Aisles on Blu-ray, it is a bonus feature on the Halloween 2 Universal release. But yeah, I don't know why, they do a lot of the classic horror movies in there, and they spend a considerable amount of time on Nighthawks in Turn the Aisles.
Oh, yeah.
So as I was watching, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. It's pretty cool. And I read up on it. Apparently it was originally a script for French Connection 3.
Whoa.
Yeah. I want to do some research and maybe do an article about that.
That's
like
cool.
scripts that got turned into something else. But it was something that like
I know who's writing that for you, Steven Scarlatta. That's like right in his wheelhouse.
Yeah,
that's
totally
a sweet spot.
He's the one that would know about
Yeah.
it. But yeah, it started as a project that was intended to be French Connection 3, and Hackman was not on board with it, and they just kind of repurposed it and turned it into Nighthawks.
And Hackman in part 2 gives one of his best performances. He gets drugged on heroin and he has to like kick it over this long sequence of the movie. And even though it's a part 2, it is one of the best performances you'll ever see. It's just genius. Yeah.
And
I think he cites it as his best.
Oh, really?
Wow. That sequence. Yeah, it's really great.
So So I mean, Nighthawks is pretty much kind of like a cat and mouse chase between a guy that's like a hitman / bomber played by Rutger Hauer, and Sylvester Stallone's kind of like, typical super cop guy. He's married to the bionic woman in this, Lindsay Wagner, and he's chasing this guy. But there's a really great sequence on a, what is that called? The, I can't remember. It's a...
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know why I don't know the name of it. It's like when you get when you're getting teleported from a wire.
It's like the
Flying Fox or something.
No, like the it's like a
like a tram.
A tram. Like a tram.
Yeah. There's a great scene on a tram where they're kind of holding.
Without Becca,
hostage.
We just don't have any general knowledge.
What is real life?
Where is our doctor? We need our doctor.
We need a doctor. We need a woman in the room.
What is a vehicle to transport people up a hill? On a wire.
Thanks, Alex Trebek. Where are you when you're reading?
Also worth noting is Joe Spinell's in the movie. He had a long-term relationship with Stallone. They were good friends, and I think this is the last time that they worked together.
Spinell was good at being friends with a lot of powerful people. He knew how to be in the room,
But
just
Spinell's
watch that
great.
Spielberg
He's great
clip.
in it. Yeah, he is great.
I think he's always great.
Yeah.
He's a fun guy.
And the other title I saw, which believe it or not, I've never seen, but speaking of William Friedkin, To Live and Die in L.A. is one that they put out.
The Blu-ray?
Yeah.
I didn't know it was out yet.
Oh, yeah, they put it out, and it's great.
Love that film.
It is great. That's also, what, I think that would make a good double bill with Manhunter. It's got, William Peterson's in it, and it's a similar, not really a serial killer, but he's a counterfeiter played by a very young Willem Dafoe, who's just insane in this movie. But the reason I bring it up on a horror show is I was kind of blown away by just how violent it is.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of gun violence, but like they
big
show
twists of violence that surprise the hell out of you.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff in this movie, but absolutely looks fantastic. Great soundtrack by who is it?
Wang
Chung. Yeah.
It looks. I remember the aesthetic of it is very Florida, even though it's L.A. It looks almost like Miami Vice, which makes sense because it's man.
And there's one chase. If you want to talk scares, there is a car chase sequence that pretty much is on a parkway, but going in the opposite direction. And I've never been more terrified in my life watching. I was just so on the edge of my seat. So there's some good stuff in there. Yeah. But yeah, if you want a little left turn from horror, I would recommend some of the stuff that they're doing with Shot Select because it's pretty cool.
It does feel like a Michael Mann Friedkin crossover.
Yeah,
it really has that vibe.
Yeah, that'd be a good double bill for sure.
I actually forgot. I did watch one other thing just today, but it's real brief. It's if you're a Nick Winding Refn fan.
Oh.
I wasn't crazy about Neon Demon. I might revisit it before I do my top 10 just to see what I think after being.
Yeah, and I think it's on Amazon Prime now.
After the initial thing, because it's so aesthetic that but the film that just hit Netflix streaming was the 50-minute documentary that came out about 2 years ago.
Oh, about the making.
My Life. My Life directed by her wife. It's very light. It really should be an extra on a DVD. I was shocked that it got its own release, to be honest,
right?
Because really, there's no story there, and he's kind of a bit of a sad sack the whole time. But it makes him a little more endearing to me. He seems a lot of words. He's always being called pretentious by a lot of people, like especially things like Neon Demon. They see it. Those who don't like it, they throw it. You watch this and go, no, that's not really who he is. Maybe it comes off that way. The funny part is it starts with Jodorowsky reading his tarot and telling him what to do with his life, and I love it. And at one point, Jodorowsky reads his wife's tarot towards the end of the movie and says, "The only way you'll be happy is if you divorce him." And I'm like, that's the greatest thing ever. It's like, you'll only be free if you leave Nick.
That's amazing.
But it's interesting. You get the feeling he never thought I get the feeling in this one, honestly, that he never thought that film was going to work. And he was only doing it because as a director, you have to keep going. Yeah. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. Yeah. I don't think he ever thought it was going to work. In any shots where you see him behind the scenes, I get the feeling he knows he's sabotaging his career because he didn't want to be too popular. Right. And so I
kind of like that movie, actually.
I mean, it's aesthetically, it's interesting, but again, it's no drive. And that's the difference, right? It didn't have that. So it's a forgettable documentary. But if you watch Neon Demon and it was absolutely your jam, check it out. You'll see an artist in the throes of making. The best parts are seeing that Ryan Gosling, it's proof evidence, is the best human that we have in movies because he comes up, he's playing with kids, he's helping his buddy. At one point, Refn goes, "Look, we need some more money for the movie. Somebody in where are they shooting? Bangkok has said they will pay us $30,000 if me and you show up to a screening of Drive and talk." And he goes, "I'm going to push for 100. Will you do it if we do it?" And then Ryan Gosling just takes a second. He's like, "If they put the cash in a suitcase, I'll do it." And then they dress up and they go and they get the cash. They count it. He's like, "As long as it's going towards the movie, man."
Yeah.
And it's like, all right. So he's got integrity, man.
Yeah, he does. He really does.
And shout out to his movie Lost River, which I'm still singing its praises. Like Refn, it doesn't completely come together, but man, I'll take that over Neon Demon. I think it's a great movie.
My wish is to get Gosling in here to do a horror movie.
Yeah.
I want him to do a horror movie so bad, but he's so busy. He's busy.
But here's the thing, Ryan. He's a big listener of the Shot podcast. So if anything's going to hit,
Gosling, come on in, man. We need you. We need to hear about your horror.
Bring in the Gyllenhaal. Come together.
Dude.
That's a good double.
Yeah. I just rewatched
You get that combo. You're just going to get a Dead Heat remake from me.
But I'd watch the shit out of that with those guys.
I would. They'd have a lot of fun, too. So anyway, that's worth checking out. And I asked you guys just before the show, because we knew Becca wasn't coming, I said, hey, let's just
some
really
Netflix
quickly,
recommendations.
just throw out a few each.
Oh, totally.
I think we could do this every week, even if it's just one or two, because sometimes you do have to scour deep into it to find interesting titles. And I think let's do it. Let's just throw out a couple.
Yeah, I wrote a couple.
I grabbed a few. I mean, we
just fire them out.
Yeah, Kidnapped.
Which one's
I wrote that one too.
Yeah, which is
Spanish.
Miguel Angel Vivas, I think his last name is.
Well, both of you recommending it. I should add it to my queue.
Oh no, you definitely should check this out. It is more of a execution dependent kind of story because there's not much to it. It's a home invasion movie.
And Rob doesn't really like this, and this one's very real.
Scary. It's actually
scary.
It is very. I remember when it first hit. My ex-girlfriend at the time was doing stuff. She was at school and she was doing some homework, and all she heard was screaming and crying, and then lots of Spanish yelling. And she goes, "What are you watching in there?" Because it from out here, it sounds incredibly disturbing. And I'm like, "You have no idea. Yeah, it is incredibly intense."
Selling me on it.
He uses split screen. Just in pure emotion, pure raw gritty emotion, it is really intense.
Whenever people do lists of home invasion, I always put it at the top of like, yeah, this is one that actually makes it feel real, and he uses long takes, background information at the start where you don't see something coming, and it's a movie. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
What else you got, Rob?
Oh, I wrote down 5 quick ones. Let's see, and I kind of went just all over the board. So, Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, is on Netflix Instant. If you've never seen it, it's one of my favorite anthologies. Three great stories, one great wraparound. Technically, it's Creepshow 3, but if you're just looking for something fun, that's a really good one. Yeah. Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh. All right. A lot of people talk about the original. The original's great. I kind of like 2. 2's interesting because at least it gives it a little bit of a backstory. I think Tony Todd's great in it. And, they reuse a lot of the same score stuff.
Directed by the guy who made Guns and Monsters.
Yeah.
That's the thing that held me back from buying the vinyl release of Candyman 2 soundtrack.
It's pretty much the same thing.
I'm going to get the same thing.
Yeah, it is exactly the same thing. But that one's great. Also, I mentioned on the show a couple of weeks ago, if you haven't seen Cold in July yet with Michael C. Hall, directed by Jim Mickle, probably one of my favorite things I discovered this year. It's a really great thriller, lots of twists and turns. And Michael C. Hall had done it right after Dexter, so it's just great filmmaking. Don Johnson, one of the best things he's ever done is in a supporting role. Yeah. So strongly recommend that. That's the same director that did Stakeland and We Are What We Are.
Even better than Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
Yes, indeed.
Throwback.
Also, I don't know if we talked about it much. There's a movie on Netflix called He Never Died with Henry Rollins.
I never saw it. That's why.
It's really cool. It's I think what works about it is Henry Rollins. It's one of those things where if it was anybody else, I don't know. He's kind of like a fallen angel that it's really fun. It's his performance is what makes that movie really stand out quite a bit. And I believe it was I actually think it was like a Kickstarted movie initially that he was involved with, and they wrote it for him and everything. Yeah. But if you like Henry Rollins and you want to see something kind of like I almost want to say like it's kind of prophecy-esque, but it's not. It's like if there was no other,
it would make a good double bill.
Yeah, that would work with that.
Better or worse than his Johnny Mnemonic role? Remember his Johnny Mnemonic Doctor?
Oh,
much better.
That was a great role.
Better.
Come on, I love Johnny Mnemonic.
And lastly, tying into our guest for the second part of this show, if you haven't watched Scream yet, Scream the TV show, it is on Netflix Instant. And in particular, if you just want to watch a one-off episode to enjoy our interview, I would recommend Season 2, Episode 10, which is called The Vanishing, and it was directed by Dennis Widmeyer and Kevin Kolsch, the guys that did Starry Eyes and the Valentine's Day segment in Holidays. That was one that in particular our guest is really strong in and has a lot to do, and I just remember being so impressed with what Kevin and Dennis did on that episode that I recommended it to you, Elric, because I didn't think you had gotten up to Season 2 yet. And I rewatched that particular episode. I was like, you know what? If you've never seen the show, I think this actually kind of works to give you an idea if you'd be into it or not. So I'm recommending you watch that before our interview drops on Monday. I think that's a good way in. And, even if you don't like the show, we're gonna talk about some fun things involving how the TV world kind of works. So I think it's worth listening to for that.
I hear you. What about you, Ron?
I had one more. 2 more, actually. I had Stage Fright, Jerome Sable's slasher musical.
Oh, yeah, I never watched that.
It's a kick. Okay. It's a lot of fun. It's once you kind of wrap your head around, it's a comedy. It's a horror comedy that's also a musical. Then you have a lot of fun with it. Basically, it's about a girl who goes to a music camp, and they put on their big show, and she wants to be the lead, and her mom was a big stage actress who was viciously killed. Meatloaf is in it. And basically it's just about a girl trying to aspire to her mom's dreams and wishes and all this other kind of stuff. But there's a slasher running around the camp and killing people. So you have these kind of moments where they break into song and dance, and it's big numbers with lots of kids, and you got Meatloaf doing his shtick. I think it was in the cafeteria and all this stuff. And then you have the serial killer who's in a kabuki mask. And he's basically wielding these 2 circular saw blades, and his thing is heavy metal. So it's like a nice contrast between
freaking movie.
this really goofy shit and then like heavy metal stuff. And have you ever seen Jerome's Legend of Beaver Dam short film? It's kind of like very much in the same theme. But I remember watching it and I had a blast. And every time I put it on for somebody like in the background, they're like, what is this?
It's so Becca, it's not even funny. That's all I know. I remember her talking about it years ago.
It's a kick. It's a kick. And then the other one, it just, I feel like we should drop a little plug to Shudder because Shudder's doing the good Lord's work.
Maybe next week we'll do all Shudder ones.
I pulled one from Shudder that I think just dropped on there, and that's Shadow of the Vampire.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
Which is the Nick Cage produced movie with
I've actually never seen that one, but I've been wanting to see it for a while.
It's really, really great because it's basically a spin on the making of Nosferatu, very kind of meta, and basically you're on the set of the making of the film, and Willem Dafoe is Max Schreck.
Why didn't you kill someone unimportant like the script girl, not the camera operator?
But he's legitimately a vampire, and it's all about him. The director knows.
Malkovich.
Yeah, the director knows, but no one else knows, and he's just like, he's constant. The director owes a debt to the vampire,
and it actually has its roots in some fact, which is that no one knows much about Max Schreck, and Schreck in German meant death, and so it was this actor that no one really can account for who just appears, and it's at a time where special effects, makeup effects, hardly existed, and look at the guy. Like Nosferatu is this incredible being. So you're like, I remember the initial stories, and then this is by the director Elias Merege, who did Begotten, which is like another thing that looks like it just appeared out of the ether. It doesn't look like a movie somebody made. We were talking about getting him on because Begotten was going to get a new Blu-ray restoration. I think it got delayed a bit. This was before we changed over, but I think that would be a fascinating interview at some point. But that's a good pick.
It's a good movie. It's a really Udo Kier.
It's a funny. Who's a comedian?
Carl Elwes is in it, and
Cary Elwes plays the cameraman.
Who's
always drunk.
Who's always drunk. But God,
Defoe got an Oscar nomination for support, and it is really, I think it's one of the best horror comedies in the sense of actually being a comedy about horror films versus a horror comedy. It's so good. It's a good movie. I'm a big fan of that one. I'll just throw out the ones that you'll already be familiar with that I think are great if you haven't seen it. Like Antichrist is on there. I have the Criterion of that. I just think it's one of my favorite, modern horror films. Late Phases, we talked about really fun werewolf film. A movie I really liked from a couple years ago, the guys were going to do the Death Wish remake, is Big Bad Wolves. The two Israeli directors, Quentin is Tarantino's favorite film of that year. It is a dark black, and I mean as black as you can go, comedy, revenge film. And some people, it is not their taste. I've had friends who have recommended they did not like. I feel like in the cheap thrills world, if you like that kind of a movie, this would appeal. The one that I know, the genius who picked this up, called The Canal. There was a great film selector once who gave up to go do bigger things. I
personally did not put that on there because I knew you would be bringing it to the table.
Now, big fan of The Canal. That's actually one of my favorite of the kind of atmospheric dread horror, almost Fulci-ish, the horror scenes. And then just one that I want to recommend. Of all these, the one I would recommend most is an actual movie, and I bet almost no one will have seen it. The guy who directed that movie from a couple years ago called The Possession, the Jewish horror. He had made these great foreign films that were all like thrillers, psychological thrillers, and he made one that just blew me away called Just Another Love Story. And it is a great thriller, and it plays with like, a character, kind of like Memento. It plays with those kind of ideas, but when I saw his 3 films and I heard he was directing Possession, that's why I ran to see it. And it was still well made. I actually thought The Possession was a really well directed film. It just didn't have that much new to it.
And he also, didn't he do The Substitute or something like that, which was like about an alien teacher?
Oh, he might.
And
I
think it was the movie that Ghost House, I think, picked it up, and then that was the movie that Raimi recognized and was like, "Oh, he's got chops," and then they put him on The Possession. The Possession is also a really good movie.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a really well put together.
Really well put together movie.
It's a really good,
legitimately some good scares in it. I wanted to revisit that over the Halloween break.
Negan as a dad. Negan's softer side,
softer side of Negan.
But no, I really recommend that one, especially those of you who are interested in saying that goes off the just straight horror channels. I think it definitely was one of those ones. I remember a friend of ours was actually coming in here, and I think his name was on a list of directors. Because obviously you are when you make things like The Possession. And I just remember going, "That's the guy. I think he can make a really great movie at some point." But who knows? Maybe he has to write them too. I don't know if he didn't write The Possession. Anyway, those are some fun ones for you guys. Maybe we'll keep this going. one. Maybe we'll do an all Shudder app.
Yeah, that'd be cool
or
too.
just across the board, because I think, I mean, like maybe you guys can tell us on Facebook, you know, what service do you use? I mean, like I use Hulu.
Amazon's really good.
Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, and Shudder as my primary sources for like streaming digitally. And then occasionally, you know, if I have, I go off and on Showtime and HBO depending on what's out. You know, what I want to watch. Right now, I have HBO because, you know, of Westworld, and I have Starz because of Ash vs. Evil Dead. But once those sign off, I sign off.
Right.
Move on to the next thing.
Smart. Yeah. Anything else?
Well, we were. I mean, we could.
Boy, without Becca, we're just kind of like lost puppies here. I will say, I wanted to talk a little bit quickly about Intruder, just because I brought it up last time.
Oh, that's right.
Last week, and I didn't get a chance. So
yes, talk.
Because it's one of those movies that when I grew up in Connecticut, and there was this place called Mad Mike's Video, and it was an awesome like little place that had, you know, shelves isolated by directors. So you had Cronenberg, and it was all the Cronenberg stuff, and it was and the Raimi shelf was very, you know, not used often. There was like the VHS tapes were always in stock, and it was also where I got to see the Sam Raimi short films, and they had a bootleg of all these short films that Raimi, Rob Tappert, Scott Spiegel, that they all did. Helping Hand. I don't know if you guys have seen Helping Hand.
I have.
It's basically about the hamburger helper hand, and it like goes bonkers on this woman. And Intruder was always up there, and I've always kind of just glossed it over as just kind of like complete sleaze. I was like, I don't know what this is. But I caught up to it. I think I watched it on Shudder. And
Uncut?
Yes, I think so, because I've never seen the original cut, so I don't know. But it was pretty bloody. It was pretty bloody, but I want to know what the appeal is, because, I mean, like, obviously the gore, there's a gore factor to it that you have a lot of fun with, and then Scott Spiegel can't help but throw himself into like crazy camera trickery all the time. Like literally in the first 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, I'm in the grocery cart. Oh, I'm sitting on the shelf next to a box of cereal and somebody's grabbing me. You know, it's like all these little like camera tricks. But then it's just like literally a cat and mouse movie where everybody just wanders around. But, you know, I had mentioned it last week, and I was like, yeah, Intruder. But I'm just really curious. Have you guys seen it recently?
Yeah, well.
No, not since it got released.
Well, I worked on that Blu-ray.
Yeah.
And I did all the interviews with everybody in it for it,
right.
including Scott Spiegel, which I was excited about because Evil Dead 2 is like my favorite movie.
Yeah.
I'd never seen it. I think a big part of it was the notoriety that
it's
been
bloody.
cut, and you can never get the original version. This is the first movie that Greg Nicotero, Howard Berger, and Robert Kurtzman did as K&B.
Right.
So that's another like thing about it.
Great work. I mean, like,
and it was produced by Lawrence Bender. You know, it's his one of his first movies.
Right.
He went on to produce all the Tarantino stuff pretty much up until Inglourious Bastards. Bless you. So I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, it's kind of like that weird pocket of, for years I was looking for Crime Wave, because it's just it's that Sam Raimi, Coen brothers. How can that not be amazing? You know, it's just from that period. I think it's just that weird thing that we have about on being unable to find these movies.
Yeah.
But now that I watched it, it's a pretty goofy slasher movie.
Super goofy.
Great.
There's a fun little twist that you're kind of like, oh, didn't see that coming. Got it.
It's pretty silly, but it's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember thinking, that was the thing I thought you mentioned the camera angles. It's like, at least Raimi's had a reason for being
Oh, no, totally.
But this is like literally, I think you get the POV of a rotary phone from under the phone.
Oh, absolutely, where she's like putting her finger across the screen. And
and you're just kind of like, okay.
But the thing,
I guess.
The funny thing about it is that I see that, you know, and Scotty did, you know, he did Hostel 3.
Yeah.
And he hasn't, like, there's no change. Like, you watch Hostel 3 and it's like camera angles everywhere. And I think he did one of the From Dusk Till Dawn sequels as well.
Yeah, the second one.
And it's like, never change, please. Never change. The stuff is amazing. It's so much fun.
Me, or
like
wasn't
his
he meant
3.
to be on our show once? I remember coming
to
Killer POV, and he was meant to show up there.
It was when I interviewed him for Intruder. I tried to book him on the
I thought he was coming, and I thought we showed up and just, okay, interesting.
Yeah, he canceled us, I
one day.
think.
Okay.
We should use it. We
Spiegel.
should use this moment as a platform for people to tell us who they would like to see.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't think we've done that, you know, where it's like, give us a wish list.
The answer is
By the
Ken
way,
Wiederhorn.
2017's coming up. I mean, we've literally got the show booked through the end of the year.
Yeah, we've got some fun stuff.
Yeah.
But last Scott Spiegel thing, the opening of Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, where he's trying desperately to deliver that giant pile of pizzas.
Yes.
There's a scene where he kind of puts him on a banister and a guy comes out and starts eating it. That's Scott Spiegel, director of Intruder, trying to steal the pizza.
Nice.
So
nice.
there you have it.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Yeah, let us know who you think we should try to get next year.
Yeah.
And
reasonably.
And we're going to talk about film as political, but one thing, that's something I know Becca was really invested in.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we're going to wait on that. One title I want to throw out there, so maybe you could watch it or get this before we even talk about it, is a film I hadn't thought about in a long time, but wherever you fall on the political spectrum. But for me, the character I kept coming to was the character from Roger Corman's one kind of serious foray into Oscar-y type serious dramas, which was The Intruder. Funnily enough, also got The Intruder.
Two Intruders.
It's a character that William Shatner plays a really serious character, a guy who goes down to kind of stir up racial prejudice, even though he doesn't necessarily believe it. He's kind of doing it to just stir, and that idea of somebody who tells you what you want to hear without necessarily having that ideology. And I've heard a lot of people comparing Trump to every character under the sun, right?
Yeah.
That's the only character that really came to mind. And I was like, in a really real way, in a way that's kind of scary because you don't know what somebody believes at all. And that to me is more scary than somebody who really believes an ideology. This film is, I really believe it's Corman's masterpiece. And if you watch the documentary on Corman, it's a real tragedy because, well, maybe it's a bonus because we got so many crazy movies, but had that film hit, he probably would have gone in a totally different direction. But because it was right in his drive-in period, no one went. And he said, there's a great interview where him and his brother are like, well, we made these very serious movies. What should we do? He goes, well, we can never do that again. Like we can't make a real movie. We have to go back to, and of course we got the post-cycle and everything afterwards. But I would really recommend it. It was really hard to find for a long time. When I saw it, I had to go to that Eddie Brandt's place. It has recently been re-released on DVD and it's only like $12. It was AKA, and this is the best thing about it, the actual other title was I Hate Your Guts. So if you look up the poster for this, it's Intruder, AKA I Hate Your Guts.
Wow.
I mean, it's just one of those films I think is really timely, and I think it'd be ripe for rediscovery to discuss. And we'll go into in depth. I think that'll be a good topic for us next week when Becca's back.
And the one thing, I mentioned it last week, but I want to remind people that Severin Films put out The Killing of America. And I wrote an article after we talked about it in the show last week. I think a perfect complement to it, actually, is Adam Simon's 2000 documentary, The American Nightmare.
Definitely for what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, because if you haven't seen, I recommend them both because The Killing of Violence shows you a lot of these violent incidences that happen in mostly televised in
like a historic backdrop
American pop culture, whereas The American Nightmare is guys like Romero and Tobe Hooper and John Carpenter responding to those very things and saying how they influence their movies. So I think
if you want to go a third, you go our buddy Joe Madry's Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue, which
is
gives it
on
a really
Netflix.
nice narrative. Yeah,
that's on Netflix Instant.
It's got a really good flow the way they tell that story.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good, simple, historic recap.
Yeah. There you go.
So those things will help you in that conversation if you're interested.
Sure. We're going to tackle those. And we thank you for listening on social media. Shockwaves Pod on the Twitters, and then it's just Shockwaves Podcast on Instagram. And Shockwaves on
Facebook.
Yeah, I think we got them all right.
Give us a shout out.
There you go. And come back Monday. We're going to talk to John Karna from Scream. From the producers of Insidious and The Purge comes a new kind of exorcism. Incarnate follows a scientist with the ability to enter the subconscious minds of the possessed. He must save a young boy from the grips of a demon with powers never seen before while facing the horrors of his past. The Dark Knight's Aaron Eckhart and Game of Thrones' Carice Van Houten star in Incarnate, directed by Brad Payton, director of San Andreas, in association with I Am Global, Blumhouse, and WWE. Incarnate also stars David Mazouz of Gotham and Catalina Sandino Marina from Maria Full of Grace. Not only is Incarnate an entirely new take on the exorcism genre, but is also the only wide-release horror film this holiday season. So grab a friend and go see Incarnate in theaters on December 2nd. Today's episode of Shockwaves is brought to you by Incarnate, in theaters on December 2nd. Incarnate follows a scientist with the ability to enter the subconscious minds of the possessed. He must save a young boy from the grips of a demon with powers never seen before while facing horrors of his past. So grab a friend, check out Incarnate in theaters on December 2nd. Okay, and welcome to episode 26, part 2, the interview portion of Shockwaves. I'm one of your hosts.
Hope your weekend was great.
For us, it went like that, like momentarily.
It's like minutes.
I'm one of your hosts, Rob Galluzzo. I'm sitting here with Mr. Elric Kane and, of course, Ryan Turek.
Hello.
I'm drinking some Purple Haze beer from New Orleans.
Holy smokes.
Right. Hello.
You know what kind of guests I like? The ones that bring us beer.
Raspberry lager.
Oh, that's that.
That's the taste.
That's what that tasted.
But it looks like Papa Justified from Skeleton Key. And
so wait a second, because you were talking about this Skeleton Key before we started.
This is already out of control.
Wait. Is his name really Papa Justified?
Yes, if you look at the credits, it's Papa Justified.
I don't remember that.
Why would I make up Papa Justified?
I thought you were talking ghost.
If I'm wrong, I'll eat our guest shoe.
Drinking on air.
But this was given to us by somebody who shoots in New Orleans.
New Orleans, yes, our very special guest. And I just to set it up, I mean, obviously, one of the most interesting evolutions of the horror genre of the last couple of years has been horror TV. Because there was a point where we thought, like, you can't do whatever that show, that movie as a TV property.
You can't do Hannibal as a series.
Right? And then we get 3 seasons that are freaking awesome of Hannibal. And that's the thing is now pretty much, Ryan, I think you might have even written either an essay or an article about it saying that TV is now
TV's a new remake.
the okay way to do a remake and not get all the shit
because
for
there was that period we were getting so many remakes, and then there was a little bit of backlash, and then all of a sudden I forgot what the first show was that actually kind of took that feature film and then turned it into a series or attempted a series. But I started just kind of seeing a pattern. I was like, oh no, this is the new way of kind of retelling something, because then you can not just do a remake if you wanted to, but you can then spin off and do sequels.
Yeah,
you can
not to be
it.
judged straight away.
Yeah, from Dusk Till Dawn did that.
Yeah,
they did a remake,
and
then they spun off from that. Damien just went straight sequel. The Exorcist is Bates Motel, exactly. Yeah. So
and now Exorcist is crushing it.
Yeah,
yes.
I really want to see that.
It's really good.
Yeah.
You do.
Well, we should introduce our guest.
Introduce our
guest. Who are you? His voice.
Who are you? One of the ones.
Who am I?
One of the shows that I really was skeptical about, only because the slasher genre in particular seems like it's meant within the confines of 90 minutes to set up, murder people, and then execution. But I really love what they've done with the Scream TV series. So sitting with us is my favorite character on the show, Mr. John Karna.
Hello.
Hi, who plays Noah.
Thank you.
And if you're part of the movie universe, he's technically the Randy of the show. I guess it's safe to say.
Yeah.
He's the horror nerd.
He's the horror nerd.
And he even ends up doing podcasting. Which
he's like the everything nerd now. He's been upgraded to being nerdy about everything.
And you also got to be with a girl in the long run.
Yeah, I know.
I call that the jump the shark moment, but that's just me. Yeah.
I know. Why is it that my character's always the one making out with the girls?
They don't
complaining.
They don't end well, unfortunately.
No, I know.
I don't want to spoil it too much, but and the other thing is, I mean, much to my surprise, I learned that you listened to Killer POV, our previous show.
I did. Yeah. Well, it was funny when I first got the pilot to shoot it. I was such a fan of the movies before, but I was like, man, I really got to be like so much more knowledgeable than I already am, because I loved horror movies, but I wasn't really like this fan that I am now. And so I listened to you guys all the time, and it was kind of nice to just like listen to horror fans talking about horror, even though I didn't always know.
You're saying that we completely influenced your characters.
So in the end, I would say it's all of our characters.
I think we need to open a school called Shockwave School for horror fans.
Yeah. You just strap people in Clockwork Orange style and just.
So which one of us? I know you can say Becca because she's not here. Did you base it on? Let's just cut to the chase.
For the entire pilot, I kept trying to do this Australian or this New Zealand accent.
I almost got you with the bottle thrown across the room right now.
What was that raining on me?
That would have been good. We need a Kiwi character.
Yeah, right.
Cliff Curtis was busy playing every ethnicity in America.
Yeah, but no, man, it's so crazy to finally be here because I've been listening to you guys on and off just when things are crazy.
How did you hear about it?
I was going to say, let that be a lesson to other future guests.
Right,
if you are a celebrity, don't hesitate to reach out. We're ready
out.
We're ready for you.
Ryan Gosling.
Yeah,
Ryan Gosling. We gave you a shout out on Friday.
Yeah, it's time to come.
Please come on the show.
Come on.
Right. You know what? That was kind of the craziest thing. I remember one time listening to you guys after the first season, and you guys mentioned the show, and I was insane because I think Becca was like, I heard that John actually listens to the show. And
Yeah,
then,
we're like, come on.
Yeah, you were like, come on in. I dare you. And
And it took this long.
yeah, I know. I was just scared.
So he
Well, we
came
needed
out.
to see if the show was going to be around.
You and me both, man. You and me both.
Well, we'll get into all that stuff, including how you discovered the show. I think I already know, but we'll get to that. I just want to know a little bit, if you can give us a little bit of context of kind of, because you were doing a little bit of acting before getting Scream, but also like, how did Scream happen, and what were your initial reactions to the idea of them making that into a TV series? You had mentioned you were familiar with the movies already.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, definitely. Like, what in terms of like the context of where you were when the first Scream came out and what the subsequent sequels meant to you.
Man, I was a wee little babe when the first Scream came out. I think what year did it come out?
96.
Like 96. Okay, so I was like,
Were you alive then?
yeah, dude, but just barely, just on the cusp of consciousness.
Are you old enough to drink that beer? I just want to make sure.
I am. Yep. But I think I was born in '92, so that was I was like 4 or 5. But I actually remember my friend Eric Rollinger was the guy who would have all of the horror movies because my parents were like, you should not watch this. My mom had like a scarring moment when she was very young watching The Exorcist. And so since then, she like banned that movie from our house and just all horror movies in general. So I would always sneak over to my friend Eric's and we watched the first 2 Screams like back to back, which was awesome. And I had always kind of loved horror movies. But by the time I was in Los Angeles, I had been living there for about a year and I got the audition for the Scream show, and it was kind of crazy because you get it and you love the movies so much. Like I really did love those films, and they kind of were like the first R-rated movies I had seen. And I was so skeptical at first because it's MTV and you never really know like what that's going to mean. And MTV has a certain brand that they're really trying to cater to, more so than a lot of other networks. And it's cool to see their evolution in their programming, but like they definitely have a thing.
Well, I was going to say, did you know from the outset that Craven and Marianne Madalena and some of the other folks that were involved in the original series had at least a little bit of a touch on it?
Yeah. Like they had said Wes Craven was going to be an executive producer on it. And, I never met the guy, which is just so... it was insane. When he passed, a year ago. Like, while we were on set, I'm pretty sure. And it was just such a crazy thing to be like, oh, my God, this... dude we all wanted to meet so bad, and he was just gone too soon. But it was it's crazy when I first read like they didn't release the pilot or anything when I first auditioned, so you just read these like snippets, and the audition at first was like Noah just having this crazy rant about he was like talking about how it was kind of that first monologue in the pilot where I talk about like the girl, like, all of her friends are dead and then she's in the back of the ambulance and all that. But it's like it was this crazy longer one. And then at the end, it got really dark. And he's like, it's just, you have ownership over it, And it was like, and it was cool because I remember doing the audition and thinking like, that was cool. It was a good time. But then, what's so funny about that is I didn't hear anything back for like 3 months or something like that. And, you just move on.
That is long.
You just move on. You do your thing. I heard like, nah, they weren't really into you. And, you just keep doing it. And then they called and they were like, hey, by the way, so that time that you auditioned, they're going to screen test you tomorrow. And I was like, what, really? And they were like, don't worry, you're not going in for the screen test. They're just going to play that first audition you did a long time ago. And then they're just going to decide off of that.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, okay, well, all right, that's cool. I guess I'll just do my own thing and not get the job. And so then when they called the next couple of days, they were like, you're doing it. And it was crazy. It was such a crazy thing.
How soon after that did they start shooting the first season?
Or was
it just the pilot?
Yeah, after that, we just started with the pilot. So after they said that I was doing it, we had like maybe 2-3 weeks, I'm thinking, where like they were casting other people. So I was kind of helping out with that. They would like bring me in for chemistry things. But then we just shot the pilot for about a week in Los Angeles, which was such a good time because that was what the crazy thing was. And I think that was kind of my point is like, you're so expectant that the rest of the cast and the rest of the people are all going to kind of be I don't know, whatever negative standards you could have about an MTV show. And every single person that I've met on that show and in that cast, the coolest people ever. It's crazy. Yeah. And we all loved each other. And even like the newer ones and the people who only were on the show for a little bit, so cool. And it was insane that we all immediately felt that when we were together, and we were just like, oh, we're having just an awesome time shooting the show.
And the people running it, I mean, I think that comes from the top, because seeing the directors you guys were choosing were people we had interviewed on ours, people like Ty West or Rodman Flender, and you're like, who is making these decisions to pull these really interesting, what's the woman who made Honeymoon, the girl?
Lee Janiak,
yeah, and I loved her one.
She's
her
so cool. And Honeymoon is such a good movie, right?
Yeah.
Oh my
God! Just interested, like, so who? I don't actually know who is making those decisions. Do you know?
It's interesting.
Showrunner? Or?
You know, what's funny is it's such a who knows how much I could say, but it's so funny, like to do a show like this where, you know, a lot of times if you do a big studio movie, there's all of this stuff from the studio and then the directors, and there's kind of maybe a clash there. But it's fascinating that our show had so much creative voice in it, that like the Weinstein Company had a very big stake in what was going to happen, but MTV also had a very big stake in what was going to happen. Not to mention this other production company trying to just do the show and these showrunners, and so it was so crazy.
So you have two entities,
basically,
that are really trying to see the best interests of the show.
Yes, and it was fascinating how I out of that got born a lot of passion, and I think that kind of translated itself to just wanting to make this like a legit horror show while also really being cool for the demographic, you know.
Right.
Which isn't the casting.
Weird
I mean, that's
line.
how they get the young people, is the casting with you guys, you know.
Right.
But everyone's cast well, yeah.
That's really sweet of you to say, because
I like the lead too. I don't. What's her name?
Willa Fitzgerald.
Yeah, from the first episode. Like, I think
she's
that's
good. She's so good.
If you get that lead character wrong, it can all fall apart. But she seems smart enough, because you can't go back to too naive a final girl now. She seems on top of it.
Dude, she is so smart in real life. She went to Yale, and she's like, when it's kind of amazing. You know, when you're actually shooting the show, it's kind of crazy because the scripts kind of get written as you're going. Because there's all these different ideas, and the writers have to cater to like so many voices. And so a lot of times we'll like get the script the night before or something, or like pages the night before, and be like, all right, we're shooting this now. What's going to happen? What's the logic? What are the events? You know? And it is like Willa, it was the leader in like really taking the time and going through the events and being like, why would we do this? You know? And you can't, sometimes you have to suspend your disbelief because it's a slasher show and that it's fun, but her doing that was so invaluable, and it kind of set this tone of us really wanting to take it like, let's do this for real. Let's try and make it make sense.
Well, that making sense is the part that strikes me as probably difficult. And I imagine Walking Dead, there's a lot of these shows that you don't know how much of the through line is given to you guys. Like, if you guys are even aware of your actual back identities, if you're going to end up being a killer or something, if they don't tell you that, how the fuck do you play that motivation?
See, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because we don't, we definitely don't
know, right?
Until like, you know, an episode before, maybe.
And that's same of the Scream movies.
Right.
Like, they didn't give them the pages.
On production, no one knew.
Which is such a wild way to make a film.
I think Scream 3 was the biggest one where like they had no idea.
Yeah, it was all secretive and
Didn't they shoot like multiple endings for that or something? Because you know Patrick Lussier, the guy who edited all of this film,
Craven's editor.
Yeah, he's so cool, man. Awesome. We all had major crushes on Patrick Lussier, but he directed the finale, like the big killer reveal in the second season, and he would say that like it's totally the same way, where you just kind of have to. It's like the beauty of those movies and the beauty of this show is that if you take a script or a scene and you're like, what can we do here? The key is to just really make everything as vague as possible. Like, you don't really know this person's intent, or maybe have one moment where like, oh, this guy could maybe also want to murder me, you know? That kind of became the fun to like find something that could work on multiple levels like that, you know?
I have a very specific question about this. I'm fascinated by the way that Scream is written as a show.
Yes.
Okay.
Me too, man.
Yeah. And here's why, because just, you know, it's not really mild spoilers, but obviously John's on the show. He's in both seasons. So he's around for both seasons, as well as the Halloween special, which I enjoyed. And there's going to be a season 3. So basically, I have a lot of friends that have directed the show. And I don't want to throw any of them under the bus, so I'm going to remain vague about the following information. But no, what I love about, you know, I've seen kind of behind the scenes on other shows. For example, something like Dexter is very well plotted out in advance. You know, they've got their 12, 13 episodes. They figure out where all the beats are going to be, where the twists are, etc. So when they start shooting, there is no real room to change course or do anything. Now, one of my director friends who directed an episode on season 1 and 2, I asked him because it was kind of in the midpoint of season 1, and I was like, and here's the thing, when it's a TV show, it's you, the crew, everybody's the same except for the director. That is the one interchangeable thing. So my fascination, especially with watching the show, is as a director, how do you come in? What do they tell you? Do they tell you who the killer is? How do you direct these different actors? Because you're only in for one episode and then you're out. But then I imagine there's a secretive element. They don't want to tell everybody. Right. So this director friend of mine told me, I was like, did you know who the killer was when you did your season 1 episode? And he's like, yes. And it wasn't that person.
Right. Right.
He you know, to be candid, he told me you were one of them.
Yes. Well,
when he told me
that too. Yeah.
But what the funniest part of this story is apparently he was not allowed to tell you that he knew, and he said that you were not allowed to tell him. So your interactions when he directed, he's like, so what if you played this one? You're like, yeah. And I laughed because it was like you both knew that was the case, but couldn't admit it to each other.
So
oh my God. Yeah, I think I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay. And yes, I totally remember.
And I don't want to get him in trouble.
Because I had a meeting, actually. We shot the first season in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Louisiana at all, but Baton Rouge is kind of a college town, like an hour away from New Orleans. And so that first season especially was very insular. Like, we didn't have really anything else to do but hang out with each other. And I don't even know why I'm saying that. But the funny thing is, they met me, like the showrunners sat me down at like a California pizza kitchen. And they were like, all right, this is an exciting time. But you're going to be the killer. And it was like one of those things where you were so excited. And then they changed their minds. And
how early was that?
This was like around halfway through, and they were trying to give me about 3 or 4 episodes notice, I think. And you know, what was so exciting is I felt really grateful because it's like, yes, you know, you believe in us as actors that we can hold like a double life and not give it away and not be too much, you know, and not like tell you immediately that this is happening. But at the same time, we can drop like little beautiful hints. And you know, I worked with the other person who actually was the killer, and we would talk for hours and just sit and be like, okay, so how did this happen? Like, where were we here? But then it's just so funny where things change because things change. And I think people wonder if maybe that's the right path to take. And I don't know. Maybe that's the beauty of the show, though, is that it can go so many different ways. And
at that point, was it already on air?
Yeah.
Because I wonder if they make changes due to who's popular.
Fan demand,
if your character's in demand, you become a killer.
Yeah, you're short
for this life.
Right, but I found it fascinating.
Yeah, I know. And it is honestly nice to be a good guy, too. You know, it's something that you get so excited in the moment, but it feels nice to be like, kind of like a Dewey, you know, where you're like, Dewey wasn't going to be the killer.
And you would be mad if he was.
I always wanted Dewey to be the killer, though. I honestly wanted that angst. No. He like split with Courtney, you know, it's like, oh no, channel that rage.
Yeah, he was the killer, but then Courtney ends up killing him in the end. That would be pretty cool.
Channel a little bit of that. I'm really curious in terms of, because it's literally a who's who of indie filmmakers on the rise that are going through, you know, the set there, you know, Kevin Colson, Dennis Widmeyer, Lee Janiak, Ty West,
E.L. Katz, man.
Dude,
he's so cool.
That second season?
Second season, man.
Okay, cool.
He shot, I don't know if you're familiar with the show too much, but he directed the one with like Audrey tying me up in the roller coaster, and we like have this big thing, we're like screaming at each other. Yeah, and such a guy, man. That guy is so cool.
So for you personally, I mean, like, who brought, I mean, obviously when you're a director kind of jumping into a show, you try to bring your personality, you try to bring a little stamp to it, you know, and sometimes there's pushback just because it's a much more larger machine that you're kind of going into.
Mm-hmm. You have X amount of time to deliver,
and it depends on.
And also,
you come in the season. Too,
you come into the season. The actors already know what they're kind of going into. But for you, in terms of what you witnessed, you know, who really brought their who was the director that really kind of shined through and was able to kind of put their stamp on stuff that you noticed?
Put their stamp on it. Man, what's amazing is a lot of directors every single one really, it was funny. No matter what their chops were, they came in and found a way where like, it's kind of the thing of doing a show like this where because it's like half horror slasher show and half teen soap opera. A lot of the scenes, it's going to be tough to shoot in a way that's going to be anyway cinematic or like something where you feel like you're watching something new. You know, it's so easy to make it just like cut to face, cut to face, cut to face, and then like leave, you know? Yeah. But what's amazing is there would always be a moment in every episode where you were like, oh, yes, you were putting something in there. Yeah, I remember, like, I see what you're doing. And I know Lee did that all the time. Lee Janiak. She kind of was cursed. Both episodes that she came in, like something crazy happened both times. Like the first season that she came in, the one that took place in the bowling alley, the whole episode, we had the script was supposed to take place in the woods. And we were going to go to a trailer in the middle of the woods. And that was where this like big standoff was going to happen. And we were going to bar the trailer and like make the knife stick and all this stuff. But classic Louisiana fashion, we get there, we get to like the place way in the deep woods of Louisiana, and it is just like pouring down rain. And we're all just sitting in this tiny, tiny Baptist church, the entire crew and the cast, and we're just sitting there for hours because, you know, with shooting, they don't want to take an insurance day until they like absolutely have to. And so we were sitting there, and Lee's sitting there, and everyone's like, I don't know what we're going to do, you know, like, I don't know what we're going to do. And the next day, they went and scouted an old abandoned bowling alley. And then the day after that, we just shot the entire episode there. They like rewrote the entire thing. And so much of it was written kind of on the fly. Like Lee would take the actors and we'd be like, okay, how are we going to make this work? And we would have like 2 minutes before we were going to shoot. And we'd be like, okay, we should just say this and that and this. That seems good. That seems cool. And then we would just shoot it. But, you know, watching it back, that was one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The one where we were just like trying to do it, you know. It was
cool. The one that I converted, though, just to answer Ryan's question, was the Rodman's one, because it was the first one where you're talking about you don't have time to do something cinematic. But the first one, he has a thing where there's like a heart and somebody's holding a heart, and it's super surreal.
Yeah. There's some weird surrealistic imagery.
And then it was the first one where it's like, oh, whoa, this is going beyond just regular TV, like what you're talking about.
Right.
And that it was from that moment, that was where I made my turn of like, oh, cool, I'm into the show. I'll watch the rest of the season. You know?
Right, yeah. Man, Rodman's such a guy, too. It's so cool to be hanging. It's so cool to be hanging with these people who are so familiar with the genre that it's like, you can just tell. And it was the same with the entire crew, too. There was just like a lot of passion and love there that you would expect to see on like an indie film with no money.
Would you look these people's films up as soon as you worked with them?
I was curious about
for sure.
Because they're coming in. I mean, you guys are there on set and they're coming in, but do you have time to even like know like, oh, he directed Cheap Thrills or Idle Hands or whatever?
Yeah.
Or do you go back after and do research?
It depends on like the schedule, but there have been many times, like I know a lot of the cast got together and watched Cheap Thrills for the first time, and it was crazy.
Such a great movie.
That is such a crazy.
It's one of my favorite movies
right?
the last few years.
How good is David Koechner in that too?
Amazing.
Everyone's great in that film.
Yeah, with a group it plays great.
Right. And then, and you know, all of us got together and watched Honeymoon twice, actually.
Oh, cool.
We loved Honeymoon so much that we like, there were actually new people that came in and we were like, you got to come watch Honeymoon.
Because you want them to see that scene.
Yeah, exactly.
That scene that makes everybody jump.
Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, it's just brilliant. It was, so yeah. And then there would be other times where I would like go back and watch, you know, and.
Have you seen River's Edge yet?
No.
That was Tim Hunter directed it?
Yeah.
He did a couple episodes.
Oh, yeah. Tim Hunter directed like the first two after the pilot. Yeah.
And River's Edge is one of my favorite cult movies from, I think, what is it, late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah, Keanu Reeves. And
one of the earliest Keanu Reeves roles.
Previous Shockwaves
Josh
guest,
Miller.
Josh Miller.
Oh, very nice.
Crispin Glover is absolute in like batshit crazy. Post Back to the Future.
Dennis Hopper with a blow-up doll.
Yeah.
Which is the way I like Dennis.
Tim Hunter's cool. He directed like one of the cooler episodes of Twin Peaks, too. I've been going through Twin Peaks right now.
Oh, nice.
Man.
Okay.
When I realized that Tim had directed that, I was like, man, I got to go back and hang out with him. That guy was so cool.
That's awesome. All right, well, River's Edge is on our list. We're gonna part of the deal here is that
that's right. Okay.
Yeah, John was a little not nervous, but you're like, oh, I won't have the knowledge that you guys have.
Yeah, I want
to
learn
like,
from
no,
you
we're gonna have you guys come here, and then we're gonna, based on your tastes, we're gonna give you recommendations at the end of the episode
in exchange for a cameo on the show. As a podcaster,
as my three podcasts.
Sorry, Elric, I think you're just outside the demo.
Oh, hey, I'm less outside than you are.
My
I'm 2 years closer.
Wait a minute. But let's go back a little briefly before the show. When you saw the original Scream movies, did they scare you? What scared you as a kid? What were the movies that you and your friend Eric watched that really had an impact on you?
Yeah, the first Scream really did scare me, but I remember a lot of kids in my grade talking about it, and that freaked me out. I was so affected by horror movies as a kid, and but the first ones that I watched that just destroyed me, I watched the first Saw. And it was something that I had never seen, something that just sat with the violence like that. And it just really didn't. And that guy in the pig mask really destroyed me for so long. But actually, I remember the movies that I loved watching with Eric the most. We watched all 3 Evil Deads in a row.
Nice.
And we had no idea what to expect because we had just watched the first Evil Dead. I don't know how he had found out about it because we were kind of young. And then so he rented Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness the minute we stopped watching the first one. We went to Hollywood Video and came back. And we were so excited about Evil Dead 2. We were like, I think this is the best thing we've ever seen. And then
you are correct.
And then we saw Army of Darkness and we were like, what happened? And I think if I came back.
What a wave of emotion.
In just one day, too.
Now, mind you, man, we had to live with that wave of emotion over the course of 10 years.
You had so much expectation built up.
So much expectation. It was oh my God.
Yeah, I had mine very sped up.
Just to kind of go through it all over the course of several hours.
Now, while Army of Darkness is not my favorite of the 3, when I go back and look at it, I think it's the best made or the most ambitiously made.
Yeah,
it is due for a revisit.
When you watch it, everything that Sam Raimi does studio level now, Spider-Man movies, whatever, you see it in every frame of that movie.
Yes,
it's insane.
Totally,
so it's good stuff.
That's cool.
Give Army a chance, man.
Yeah,
listen, you can watch the show.
I am such a Sam Raimi
pretty cool with the budget he had.
I am such a Sam Raimi fan. Yeah, it's God. Spider-Man 2 is absolutely. I'll never forget watching that in the theater.
Yep.
Were you at the time when Scream had come out? Were you aware of the filmmaker? The horror filmmaker. Did you have any favorites at the time, or were you just kind of just building that knowledge up?
I think it definitely wasn't a filmmaker thing for me because I was when this was happening, when I saw the first Screams, I think I was in 5th or 6th grade. So I really was just we were just daring ourselves to see.
Grade,
he's a big Cronenberg fan.
So I was a huge Wes Craven fan. I watched Serpent in the Rainbow, which would be great for history class.
Who probably was like that is Carlson, who plays Brooke on the show. She's probably the biggest cinephile of our cast. Yeah, wow. She's so dope. It's crazy. But that. I never really realized that directors had a vision and a raison d'etre, you know? I didn't really know. But
I was gonna say, watching Scream. Scream relies on you having a little bit of knowledge of the tropes. And that stuff. Was it for you just merely a great roller coaster ride, or did you kind of know? And did it send you off like many to go find the films that it was referencing? There's that great moment when Randy says in Scream 2 where he's just rattling off graduation day, Dormant Drip Blood, blah, blah, blah.
I still have a list on my computer of everything and I haven't seen all of them, but I remember getting ready for the pilot and just rewinding that moment actually and just writing down.
We got to do this again with both of them. We got to get Randy in here.
Oh, that would be
together.
Crazy.
Just nerd out.
Yeah, I'd love to meet that
Jamie Kennedy.
Jamie Kennedy
and Jamie Kennedy would probably send us all out of the room just to record this by himself.
Yeah, probably.
I would just geek out about the Jamie Kennedy experiment.
I know, right?
That was maybe the funniest thing I had ever
seen
as a kid. I
liked
it. I loved that.
When you read the scripts, and obviously your character is the one that does a lot of the fun references and things like that. So truthfully, how often do you have to look up a reference and be because there was a I'll call it a love scene in season 2 where you immediately reference the prowess of one Reggie Bannister, Phantasm 2, and I was like, that's what I was like. I love the show. They're gonna reference that.
I did immediately look up that sex scene, absolutely, because I was like, really, is it that crazy? And it is. It's a crazy.
He never gets to finish.
Yeah,
that's Reggie's curse. Reggie's curse. Hashtag Reggie's curse.
Hashtag Kathy's curse, man.
Yeah.
What?
You deserve to be here, sir.
Brian Collins is helicoptering in right now.
Brian, I'm so sorry. I missed that
piece of
screening.
shit.
I haven't seen it yet, but I was in Africa when that was
Don't worry. We're gonna when the Blu-ray comes out, you're coming over.
Oh, dude,
But
please
you know what?
invite me over.
Saying you're in Africa is no fucking excuse to Brian Collins.
Listen, I was in Africa.
You're like in a
Amateur
completely
shit.
different continent. He's like, I don't care. Why weren't you there?
And just for the record, Brian Collins, if you're listening, which you never do.
Yeah, which you don't, 'cause
John was talking about how much he likes your stuff. So
I do. Collins Crypt, man. That was
There you
another
go.
thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Drawn
Look at
and
that.
Quartered. It was a cool article.
Oh, yeah.
How did you get into this whole acting thing? Like, let's go back even before that. I mean, I don't know. It's, you know.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Houston, Texas, and I always loved theater. I did a lot of musical theater.
Why is Becca not here today?
I know.
That's her jam.
Yeah, I know.
Right
I would
up
hear
there.
her talk
I know.
about
She
that
loves
sometime.
it.
It made me happy.
If she could do musical theater underwater with a sea creature.
Oh my God, that's her dream.
I mean, imagine that guy.
And John can star in that movie.
That would be
And
great.
did you know she had a
Sing
PhD
duet.
as well?
It's like Deep Star 6 the musical. Do you want to be on board this?
I am in already.
Perfect.
I
Excellent.
signed on the dotted line. That sounds brilliant. Yeah, didn't Becca get like a PhD in?
I think literally that's
She
why
just-
she's sick today.
Yeah.
Wow, what is it in like horror studies or something? Or
It's marketing of horror as a industry.
Really?
Like, yeah, it's the marketing.
I was going to give her
cult
congratulations on the show today, but I'll reserve that for next week. I was going to follow it up with, what did you get a PhD in?
Yeah. I think she got it today. I mean,
She did.
she
Over the
defended
weekend.
it. Yeah,
Over the
she defended. But she she actually got ill on her way here, so that's why she's not
damn.
here. So I know
Damn.
she would have loved to.
And she marathoned, I think, the second season
Yeah.
on her flight,
Plane.
but had like a
was
massive asthma attack and had to EpiPen herself.
my God.
Yeah.
So she sends her regards.
Wow.
She loved the show.
Yeah, tell her
She's allergic to the show.
Or us.
Yeah. Louisiana's got a lot of mold in it. I feel you. Yeah, no, but I did a lot of musical theater as a kid, and like starting in like 6th grade, and in high school I was obsessed with it, and I actually majored in musical theater in college. I went to the University of Oklahoma, but while I was in high school, I shot this movie with a friend of mine, this guy who was like a year older than me. His name's Andrew Edison, and he's really, really, really smart, this guy. And he shot this crazy movie that him and his friend were writing, but it was an improv movie. We were like, we're going to do it like Curb Your Enthusiasm. And it was about like these 3 boys in Houston who decide to go and like leave their, wealthy homes and live out downtown and be homeless and live out the plot of The Catcher in the Rye. But it's like the main dude who's leading us, and he's like, he hadn't actually finished it, so he doesn't realize that he's like crazy and like, having a lot of problems. So like the whole movie is insane, and it took us like years and years to shoot it. And my poor parents, like they would always want to go visit family in Florida and be like, guys, I'm not going. I'm shooting this movie over Christmas. And as I was going to school, we actually got it in the Slam Dance Film Festival.
Nice. Yeah.
And after I went there, I had been such a musical theater kid, and I still am, and I love theater so much. But we went to Slam Dance, and it was like, I don't know, that atmosphere is something you just don't get anywhere else, where everyone was so cool and kind, and like, I don't know, everyone was just amazing. And I was like, oh, I think this is the atmosphere I want to be in for the rest of my life. And that movie was really helpful in getting representation. And I got this brilliant manager, and everyone was so nice. And then after my sophomore year, and I guess I should mention, in between these first 2 years while I was going to school, my first job that I ever actually got was the lead of this movie called Premature, where I actually worked with Carlson for the first time. And it's about this kid who like relives the same day over and over again, like Groundhog Day.
I've seen it.
Oh no! Oh no! Really?
I have seen
Either
it.
way, every time he prematurely ejaculates, he restarts
Whoa.
the day. Yeah. So basically, I'm just sitting there having an orgasm like every scene.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy movie. But then after that, I was like, I think this is what I want to do for the
I
rest
think we
of my
know why
life.
Becca didn't show up. She already knew how that was going to go.
And my mom, she was so proud. And
Yeah, I
that
was going
movie
to say,
came
what did
out.
your mom say?
She showed everybody. She showed my sister's in-laws. I will never forget when my sister's in-laws, who are the sweetest people. His dad used to be a pastor, and they all were just sitting there while I was having an orgasm on screen, just like not laughing. And it was awesome. But
Now, is that an acting O face, or do you deliver your real face? Do you show your true self in these acting moments?
Oh, come on,
who
Elric.
can
Have
know
another
what the real face
This
is?
is Elric James.
Genuinely
James
curious.
Lipton.
You know, that was my audition for that movie. I remember
Yeah.
they were like, "We're just gonna need you Just
show us the
just
face.
go from nothing to full on. Give us the full thing. And I just sat there with 4 people watching. And I just went for it.
But see, once you can do that, you can do anything, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think once certain fears, once you get over it, you're good to go.
It was very Lars von Trier. It was awesome. I was like,
but I'm curious, the relatives, once you got into something that was horrifying, like the horror genre, what did their attitude change a little bit, or was it pretty much the same?
Yeah, that's it's funny. My mom was just so, bless my parents' hearts, that they were like, hey, I was like, parents, I love this school so much, and I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for letting me major in musical theater. But I'm just not going to do that, and I'm going to move to Los Angeles with this girl I just met, and we're going to move in together, and it's going to be awesome, and I'm going to try and act now. And so anything was the best thing they ever thought. Like, I'll never forget getting like a one-line guest star, and my mom and just like crying, and like I was like That's so awesome, happy, So then when you get something like this, especially now that when they knew it was like an MTV thing, they were super excited.
So what's the timeline from getting to LA to that first?
Man, I guess it was like maybe a year, and I had done like 2, maybe 1 guest star, and then like a pilot that didn't go, and
That's pretty quick.
Yeah,
I mean, a year.
Was.
That's good. That's
it was kind of insane. It all was just like happening, and I still feel incredibly like wow, because we had heard so much about the casting process too, and how like they went through so many kids. Because it was kind of one of those things where MTV and the Weinstein Company both had visions of what they thought the cast of this like horror show could be, and so apparently they went through like thousands of kids for every part. And it just goes to show, even my story, they like didn't think I was the guy for months, and then they were like, maybe that is the guy, and so it's really like you're just like, God, I'm so lucky that this actually got to happen, and it's been so fun.
They're a good eye for talent. I remember seeing because was Teen Wolf before you guys or after?
It was
right?
Before, yeah.
I remember seeing the first maybe couple episodes and thinking the friend character. I just instantly knew that guy's going to be huge. Like, his comic timing was so sharp, and then he ends up being the lead in all these Maze Runner movies.
Oh, right.
Dylan.
No.
But as the friend, I was like, that guy, I think they have a good eye for casting, because that show was really well cast, and it made it watchable. A show that shouldn't be, like, it should be just so silly, especially at our age, and the kind of movies we saw that they were based on, but it was actually fun. I watched the whole first season of that one, too.
It's amazing. This actress I met in doing this, like, crazy thing in Alaska, she had a tiny part in, or it wasn't so tiny. It was like she was like the villain, I think, in one of the seasons, and she was like, I will never forget that experience. That was something where everybody in the cast was so dialed in, and we were so passionate, and it just blows your mind that we're living in a world of TV now where something on MTV can be like that. It doesn't seem possible, but it is, and that's cool.
So how has your life changed a little bit since then?
Since
Scream. I mean, like, are you still living in that place that you lived in when you first
we
moved
were
out?
living in...
Dude, he's sitting at the table with us. You need to ask this question.
My life has only gone downhill now. I just lived... This Purple Haze was the last thing I could buy.
You got a gig playing Goofy at Disney.
Exactly.
It's the whole swingers thing.
Yeah, this was the first thing I've done in months. I'm going to be sleeping out back, actually. Gosh, it's funny, like, she's my ex-girlfriend now, but she's the coolest. We were living in this tiny studio apartment that was like 400 square feet, and we had a Murphy bed that came into the middle. Like, it was like the living room and then the Murphy bed.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And we did that for a year, and she was working as a barista at Starbucks, and she would always have the opening shift at like 4:30. And so we would both just wake up at like 3:30, and I would try and pretend like it was normal, so we'd like turn on all the lights and turn on the news and chug coffee and like talk about the day. How's the day gonna be, And when she would
too young for that. You're too young for that shit.
Well, I don't do... Yeah, we don't do that now. We're very tired. But what's so funny is when she would leave, that's when I would get all my movie watching done at like 5 a.m. I would just like sit chugging coffee, and that's how I watched the first Halloween, for the first time, just sitting at 5 a.m. And it was kind of amazing because I was in this just haze of like, wow, this is like so cool. I don't know. It was.
That's why people go to all-night movie marathons, because horror movies are so much better when you're delirious.
Some
There's something about it.
Some movies really do work in that
context. Like we tried to see The Beyond at midnight. Every time I go, I'm always kind of am I in The Beyond? I don't know what's happening right now.
My mind is filling in the blanks. Suddenly, like, I'm seeing things that I'm not supposed to see.
You guys, wow, this is so great. I don't mean to derail the conversation.
No,
please.
But Carlson and I went to Cinefamily like maybe the first week I got back. Yes. and we saw Possession, and it was the craziest.
I
don't know this one. I don't know this one. Tell me about it. Give it to me.
Weird little film, very indie. You know.
Can we hold each other while you talk about this? This is my one. This is my one.
Well, I've been wanting to see it for so long because that was like your favorite word in the history of the English language.
Did it live up to your expectations?
Wait a minute. Did Elric host?
No, actually.
No, I never did.
But it wasn't a true screening.
Yeah, it wasn't a true screening.
Wow, yeah.
But what did you think? Honestly, I mean,
I couldn't believe some of the crazy ways to stage these scenes, and it was very Twin Peaks the way they staged these scenes. Like all I can think of is was the how they
Professor Elric.
Intriguing as the self-appointed expert on Twitter.
Well, he runs Alaska's page.
I do, unbeknownst to him. Yeah, he's dead now. Hey,
oh yeah, I know. Wow, it's but that crazy scene where Sam Neill's rocking in the rocking chair, and then she comes in and it's blocking her, and
people laughed at the Cine Family. They'll laugh at some weird moments like that, but there's a pathos to the humor. Like you have to laugh because you're like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah, there's something really crazy, and you just don't see actors really. Which is another similarity to Twin Peaks that I'm feeling is these actors who are giving everything they have to making crazy choices, and that's part of the horror of it all. And you just get so this.
Don't you
is
think
totally
that's?
how
I mean,
people
I'm
should be.
curious as an actor, but don't you think that's knowing that you trust the safety net, which is the director. He's gained your trust to go there. Because he's talked to he's communicated. If you go back to the Twin Peaks pilot, I don't know if it's the international version, but Laura Palmer's mom, I can't remember the actress, on the phone. It's one of the best performances I've ever seen, and it's getting news over a phone, her and Leland. And her performance, and she's like you said, she's giving you everything. But to know that there's somebody watching whose taste you trust and how far to push your performance, they're not going to let you fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things, you guys being on TV and changing directors every week, that would take a lot of trust to me.
It's funny, I actually just recently watched the special again, just recently, hours ago, because I hadn't actually. The truth is, I hadn't seen it until today because I was traveling when it had come on, and I get very nervous to watch myself.
I tweeted you about it.
Come on. You did. I know, which was so nice. I was like, wow, I should see this.
The Friday the 13th gag literally made me laugh out loud.
I know.
I've never laughed so hard.
That was really sweet to hear you giggle. That was nice.
In the video. I actually giggle.
Yeah, it was really nice. But man, it's funny watching it now, and you can see. I was so proud of everyone because we were all so tired by the end of that. That was our 12th episode that we were going to shoot, and this whole idea of a TV movie was something that was kind of we kind of knew it was happening, but we didn't really know what that was going to mean. And I'll never forget, we were shooting Kieran all of the crazy stuff, and we were shooting all this crazy, people just freaking out, and it was the big Patrick Lussier episode, and I shot that until 2 that morning, and they released the script for the next episode that we were going to shoot, and on the schedule it had me and Santiago, who plays Stavo, and this really amazing actor Alex. We were all just going to shoot all day the next day, but we didn't know what we were shooting. And we get it at 2:30, and I'll never forget calling Santiago up, and he came to my apartment, and we just sat up until 5, memorizing all of these monologues and stuff for the next day that we didn't even know what the script really was. So it was kind of this amazing. We were all playing catch up while it was the dead of summer in Louisiana. It had really starting to get so hot, and we were so tired, and it was crazy now to watch this special and see these actors who I think we were all at this point where everything was so tired. I saw all of my cast doing really cool new choices and making fun new things and trusting themselves in a really amazing way. And I hope if we all come back for this 3rd season that we really take a lesson from that and we can just do crazy stuff, because I think that after going through Twin Peaks too, it really is. These actors, every scene, they're making some interesting choice. And you never know how much of that is the director, but I know so many of these actors were probably on set being you know what I should do? It would be really weird. And it was, and they kept it, and it's awesome,
I'll give you a great David Lynch story, which I don't know if I told it on the show or not before, but I've heard through people that have worked with him, or we have friends that have done a lot of the behind the scenes, that he's one of those directors that makes very odd choices in terms of getting things out of his actors. And I had interviewed Henry Rollins for a project, and he appeared in, I think it's
Lost Highway.
His
line is, "That wife killer's pretty fucked up, huh?"
Yes.
That's his only line. I'll never forget that.
Now, if you remember Lost Highway, he said, he's like, look, I'm a security guy at a jail. All I have to do is walk a prisoner down the hall in jail and say one line. Okay. He's like, but at the time I'm on set, and David Lynch had just discovered Rammstein. Now, remember, their big hit came from the Lost Highway soundtrack.
Yes.
He fucking loved Rammstein. It was like his favorite thing. So right before they started, every take, he would crank Rammstein so fucking loud. Whoa. And Henry Rollins said, he's like, you know what? It made me walk. My body language was different because I'm hearing this crazy German industrial music just blasting through the whole set. Yeah. He's like, if it was just me walking from one hall to the other, I would have done it differently. But because Rammstein's playing, he's forcing me to kind of walk a certain way. And I just thought, like, hearing that one little tidbit about some guy that had one scene in one of his movies, it's like, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's funny. There were a lot of moments where sometimes, like, what was very interesting being able to work with all these different directors is kind of see how they were going to interface with you or see what kind of a director they were, because it's like you come onto a machine like this and you only have so much time and so much, like, say in interesting things, because then there's going to be a lot of it that other people have so much opinion on that is going to override your opinion when you're shooting a show like this.
Is it the same DP?
All the time, yeah.
So
it's
most
Ron,
shows have that,
who is just brilliant. Ron is like absolutely the glue that holds that show together. In terms of the schedule too, this guy just like absolutely kills it.
So now that the TV thing is taking off for you, are you kind of diving into features? What do you got going on next?
I just wrapped a tiny little part on this Greta Gerwig movie. It's called Lady Bird, and it's the first one that she's directing. And it was such a cool script, and I get to sing show tunes in it, and Saoirse Ronan's going to be in it, and it was honestly like the craziest experience I've ever had in my life.
Did you talk House of the Devil with her?
I should have, man.
Oh, dude.
I was kind of nervous. I was so low on the totem pole. I was only there for like a little bit, but man,
creep up behind her.
She's so cool.
House of the Devil?
House of the Devil. I really liked that.
Are you the babysitter?
God, and I'm such a fan of like Frances Ha too, and these movies kind of shaped me. Frances Ha I watched when I first moved. Yeah, Mistress America's brilliant. Yeah, so that was cool. That was really cool.
And we don't know yet the scoop with season 3 of Scream?
We know that coming. It is coming. It is coming. It's 6 episodes, but who knows what's going to happen in the next time. We're actually not even sure if it's going to be a continuation of this or like something new. It's cool that I know that the show is really trying to be more focused now, which is going to be very interesting. Kind of this way that like slashers can be. I think they really liked the special a lot, this like focused trajectory of the special, which I really love too.
Yeah, it's like a feature. It's like another feature with those characters,
which was cool. Yeah, we got to start from scratch a little bit. It was
could
really
people
cool.
who haven't seen any watch that?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I've only seen the one episode in this. I've seen the whole first season and the one that you told me about, the Kevin Kolsch, Dennis Whitmire episode with you, which was great.
I thought you really shine in that episode. So I told people last one to watch that one if you're not familiar with the show.
That was such a crazy
a lot of the cool
time.
Stuff in the coffin and everything.
Oh, I know, and that was crazy to work with Dennis and Kevin. They were so cool, man. They're such nice.
Did you see Starry Eyes, their film?
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah. Yes. Starry Eyes is very terrifying as an actor.
Cautionary tale.
It's one that hits pretty close to home.
And that's how you got on the show.
Yep. I did a lot of crazy
You were birthed from the ground.
You
killed all your friends.
All of the old actors like joining in. That was crazy.
You puked bugs. All the good stuff.
God, that movie is great. I forgot.
Oh, man. Well, we could literally keep going for a while, and we'd love to.
Testament of a good guest is we could just keep rambling on.
We're going to be honest with you guys. He told us who the killer is, and now the showrunner is here telling us to shut this the fuck down. They are taking us off air.
This is the last episode of Shockwave.
This is it.
Ever.
Being sued.
So where can everybody find you on the socials?
Find me on the socials on @Johnny_Karn. It's a bit unwieldy, but just Google it maybe. I'm sure you'll find me.
We'll tweet.
There's a lot of Brazilian fans. Yeah. Lots of Brazilians very excited.
How about this? We'll mix this up because we were going to give you some horror film recommendations. How about we ask our listeners to tweet at you?
Oh, please.
Yes.
Their horror recommendations for you.
Oh, give me some good ones.
Have you seen Tourist Trap?
No.
Tourist Trap's my one. I'm giving you that one. Tourist Trap. I think that'd be a good one.
And just for like criteria for my friends who are going to tweet me, I watched that Canadian horror film Things.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So I am
You
down.
watched it?
I love that
Holy
movie.
shit.
So we should just tweet me stuff like that. Let's do a bunch
He
of
dropped
weird
the
stuff.
Kathy Kurse reference. Has seen Possession.
Well, it's because I bought Brian's
thing.
book too. I was
Okay,
such
all
a
right.
horror
Oh,
movie
good.
day
Wow.
fan.
You're legit, man. You're legit.
I'm crazy, man.
And we thank you for listening on social media. Shockwaves Pod on the Twitters, and then it's just Shockwaves Podcast on Instagram. And Shockwaves on
Facebook.
Yeah, I think we got them all right.
Give us a shout out.
There you go. From the producers of Insidious and The Purge comes a new kind of exorcism. Incarnate follows a scientist with the ability to enter the subconscious minds of the possessed. He must save a young boy from the grips of a demon with powers never seen before while facing the horrors of his past. The Dark Knight's Aaron Eckhart and Game of Thrones' Carice Van Houten star in Incarnate, directed by Brad Payton, director of San Andreas, in association with I Am Global, Blumhouse, and WWE. Incarnate also stars David Mazouz of Gotham and Catalina Sandino Marina from Maria Full of Grace. Not only is Incarnate an entirely new take on the exorcism genre, but is also the only wide-release horror film this holiday season. So grab a friend and go see Incarnate in theaters on December 2nd.